Bless up, guys. Yannick Reid here, and welcome back to the YouTube channel. You heard it before. My name is Yannick Reid, and on this channel, we like to talk about tech, lifestyle, creativity, focusing a lot on photography and videography. So if you like that, I'd encourage you to hit the subscribe button because we're coming with a lot more of these. So today, I want to address a requested video. A lot of people wanted me to ask to explain the difference between full frame and crop sensor cameras. So I want to take on the most simplified and layman discussion around the difference between the two so that anybody can understand. So this is not going to be super technical. I'm going to use a lot of casual jargon to help everybody understand as best as possible. Okay, so the first basic thing I got asked is like, what is full frame and what is crop sensor? Here are two cameras. This is full frame and this is crop sensor. As you can see, the full frame has a bigger sensor in there than the crop sensor. A very apparent difference. The sensor is a part of the camera where light hits and basically makes the image happen. So full frame, and this over here is crop sensor. So now I want to explain, why does this matter? What do these two different sensor sizes result in? And I think we can illustrate this with some illustration. This is going to be very quick and rough because I just want everybody to understand this as quick as possible. So say this is a scene, yeah? Somebody sitting down in a couch doing Vlogtober and chatting off them head, yeah? This is a scene, yeah? Look familiar. Yeah, this is a scene. Added some color to help you guys, but yeah, just imagine that this is a scene that you're seeing with your eye. So you're looking at this right now with your full frame camera, and this is what you see, right? Let's just say all of this is what you see. Yeah, so we're calling everything within this shape here is what you see with your full frame camera, right? Nothing outside here says on the camera. This is what you're seeing. You have a little record button, and this is what you're seeing, yeah? But imagine now, if you take your crop sensor camera, the exact same lens, and you don't move from where you're standing, right? You're gonna see something more like this. So yeah, this blue line here is everything that you're going to see with a full frame camera, and everything within this red line is everything you'd see with a crop sensor camera if you have the exact same lens and standing in the exact same place. So you wouldn't see all of this stuff outside here. So just like how the camera name crop sensor, it's literally a punched in version of the full frame sensor. So meaning if the conditions are the same, primarily the lens and where you're standing from, the full frame is gonna have a wider field of view, and the crop sensor is going to be a closer version of that exact same view. To understand just a bit of technical jargon, full frame, the blue area, is known as traditionally like the photographic standard field of view. Meaning like this is kind of what we start with, and then as technology progressed, they made crop sensors because they are cheaper to make. Smaller field of view, and is less materials they use to make the sensor. So full frame is also known as 35mm, not to be confused with film. Don't worry about any of that. Alright, so again, you're gonna ask, what does that have to do with anything, right? Alright, so you see, anytime you buy a lens, just like this one, remember the 35? Anytime you buy a lens, the focal length that's written on the lens is the focal length you see on a full frame. Meaning, if we buy this lens right here, right, and it says 35, I'm going to get this field of view on a full frame camera. But you see now, crop sensor cameras known as APS-C, these cameras' focal length, as we said, it's punched in by 1.6 times. So if you were to buy this same lens and use it on your crop sensor camera, the field of view that you're going to get is what's written on the lens, 35mm multiplied by 1.6. And 35 multiplied by 1.6 is 56mm. I just asked Alexa. So now if this here is 35, this here is 56 because it's punched in. That right now is like the biggest factor that you have to consider when entering into either full frame camera system or crop sensor camera system, is that any lens that you buy is gonna be punched in. So for example, if you say, I don't want 56 millimeters, I want to get a 35 millimeter point of view. So if you wanted a 35 millimeter focal length, you would then have to say, okay, let me divide 35 by 1.6, which is 21.875. So that means you'd have to go out and buy the nearest lens to that focal length, which may be like a 20 millimeter lens. And that's pretty much the hard part with crop sensor. If you want to get a wider field of view, you have to buy lenses that consider that and then punch in, which depending on your camera can be hard because there might not be the exact lens that you want to then divide by so you can get your ideal field of view on crop sensor. Back in the earlier days of, I'd say, digital photography, full frame cameras were touted as having superior image quality because APS-C cameras were normally made for entry-level people. So on top of being punched in, they usually took back a lot of features because they're saying no one who's really doing serious photography buys an APS-C camera. Nowadays, the gap is a little bit less because a lot of people who do like wildlife, who want lenses to be punched in, will invest in crop sensor cameras. As well as the technology has been getting so good that even though the sensor is smaller, they can still output a very comparable quality to full frame lenses, full frame cameras, sorry. Another thing is that the bigger a sensor is, the more light it can absorb, meaning the brighter an image. It can absorb more light in situations that have less light. So full frame cameras typically tend to handle low light situations a little bit better. And even in brighter situations, because they can absorb more light and more light quality, usually the overall color of the image tends sometimes to be better. The larger sensor in a more complicated fashion also can render depth a bit better than a crop sensor. You see how phone cameras now have portrait modes that tend to emulate the blurry background that you get when you're using a big camera? That is because the sensor inside a phone is even tinier than an APS-C. It's tiny, like this small. So it has problems being able to simulate true depth that a full frame camera or a big camera can produce. So it then tries to do this digitally. So photographers who really like the quality of nice bokeh, which is the term that you use to describe a blurry background, photographers who really like that usually go for full frame cameras. If you would like to ask me on my opinion on which one I prefer or what I recommend, me as a professional photographer and videographer doing almost 10 years of photography and video, I prefer full frame cameras because I know I'd like to just buy a lens and know if I want 35, I just go out and buy a 35. As well as I personally have seen sometimes the difference in quality and depth using a full frame. Even though there are some sources that say that perception is really not like a real perception, meaning they're saying it's like an imagined thing, it's not real. I don't know if that's true, but sometimes I myself have perceived the difference. I do use a crop sensor camera. This camera here, the Sony A6300, is a crop sensor camera, and I've been shooting all of Vlogtober on this camera when it's not on the phone. I like it because it's lighter, it's smaller. Sometimes when I don't feel like bringing out the bigger camera. Also, it's a camera that's cheaper, so I'm less precious with it because I know it's something easier to replace. Would I replace it with a full frame? If given the opportunity, yes. Because there are some times where, as I said, I have my lens kit, maybe I don't really want to have to punch in or that zoom in. Sometimes I just want to get the focal length that I have. In terms of photography and taking images, I would say a solid 8 times out of 10. Nobody could tell really the difference between something I shot with this camera and something that I shot with my full frame camera. Sometimes I can't even tell the difference because a lot of times when you're bringing your image into post and editing, if the scene itself doesn't have a lot of depth, something like me standing up here where the wall is there versus like, yes, all the way out to the mountains there, you'd be very hard pressed to see the difference. And most times you're going in to the editor and you're cropping anyway. Like most times I'm getting rid of the unnecessary parts of the image and I'm cropping in, and that's great. So I would always recommend beginners to get crop sensor cameras because they're cheaper and you can learn everything that you need to learn about photography on a crop sensor camera, because that's what I did. What is very, very important to know is to do the research to understand about crop sensor sizes and lenses, because every camera line usually has a set of lenses that are made for crop sensors. You still have to do the mathematical calculation on these lenses to figure out the true focal length. Like this is 18 to 50 and this is a crop sensor lens for the A6300. So yeah, that sounds pretty wide, but this in actuality is a 28 to 80 millimeter lens. And the thing about lenses that are made for crop sensor cameras is that sometimes they do not fit on full frame cameras. And in the event that they do fit, you're gonna get a view where it look like this. Basically, you just are gonna see the crop part in the full frame. So when you're looking through the hole, you're not seeing none of this, or just this you're gonna see. And when you take the picture, it's literally going to be black with only this part. That matters because if you decide to upgrade to full frame, your lenses that are specifically for crop sensors will essentially be useless. So you can work with crop sensor and there's nothing wrong with them. But if you operate without the understanding of the difference between full frame and crop sensor, you will waste a lot of money. Full frame lenses work on both cameras. They just look different. But you will always be able to use this lens. So you might ask, Yannick, why would I even buy a crop sensor lens? Why wouldn't I just buy full frame lenses only? Because lenses like these will cost like 100, 200, 300. And these lenses will start at 500 and go all the way up to 2000. So understanding is very important in terms of your decision and how you're going to lay out your career. I started with a crop sensor camera and some crop sensor lenses, and I sold them all one by one, and now I only have full frame lenses and just that one kit lens for when I'm not doing anything serious. For video, a lot of these similar principles do apply, but whereas in photography, where full frame is kind of glorified, for most of video's career, they have been using crop sensor cameras, even professional ones, known as Super 35. It's only probably within the last 6 years that full frame video cameras have been introduced into the standard, and that's because DSLRs have been able to shoot video. So I know this is a really complicated concept to understand, but I hope that I've explained it in as simple as a way for you to understand. Try and remember the differences illustrated here. Just try and remember, say full frame is just the wider one and crop is punched in. So for this, just remember you have your lens. Full frame, it's going to be 35. For crop, you have to punch in to about 56.8. Just always remember 1.6 times this. If you have any questions or something that you don't understand, please leave a comment below. I will do my best to answer as many questions as possible regarding full frame and crop sensor for as long as this video is up. I'll try my best. And always remember, composition is way more important than any of the equipment that you go buy. But still learn the equipment. Enjoy your day, week, month, year, and do continue to bless up yourself.